All right, at 7 o'clock, we'll go ahead and get the City Council caucus meeting started. First on our discussion agenda is the waste collection agreement. Mr. Wolfeck and Ms. Hoffman are going to take this on.
All right, thank you. We're here tonight to talk about our waste collection agreement with Rumpke. I do want to take a moment to introduce Robin Klaber. She's in the audience. She is Rumpke's municipal public sector representative, basically our account rep. And she's here tonight in case y'all have any questions later on. The current contract was awarded to Rumpke in June of 2021, and we are now approaching the end of the first two-year term and have the option to renew for 2 more years. So the purpose of this discussion is to set direction on either renewing that contract or rebidding the service completely. So the current fees, the solid waste collection runs our residential accounts $15.45 per month. Plus there is a fuel surcharge on that, and recycles are $5.50 per month. Per the contract, they're allowed a 5% increase every 2 years if we do the renewals. That would bring the monthly waste collection up to $16.22 per month, and recyclables up to $5.78 per month. And if we do renew, then there will be 3 more options before the final extension ends June 30th of 2031. We did mention that there is a fuel charge that's also added to the residential bills. That's determined annually the first week of March, and it's in place for 12 months. So that gets adjusted once a year based on fuel charges. And there's a table in front of you that shows what those charges are based on the cost of fuel. Some of the contract highlights, large item pickups can be done at no additional cost. Each resident is provided with 1 tote. They can request a second tote at no additional cost, or they can also ask for smaller ones. Sometimes, smaller households want a smaller tote because they're easier to handle. They'll also pick up waste from personal garbage cans, garbage bags, or bundles, like for twigs, yard waste, things of that nature. They consider safety. Routes are chosen to avoid school traffic issues and not to interfere with school schedules. The drivers communicate with Sherry, our clerk, on a daily basis. They call in toward the end of their shifts to see if there's any complaints, any missed pickups, or things like that. They also have contacts with Public Works in regards to construction or street closures. Also, per the contract, we could host a waste event biannually or twice a year, but currently we participate in the annual 3-county waste collection event. Rumpke is involved in our community. They provide cardboard trash cans for our city events, and they also participated in Touch a Truck. The service has been pretty good with Rumpke. Actually, I should say very good. We have about 8,000 residential accounts, and you can see per month this fiscal year what the number of complaints have been, and even in the highest months, it's less than 1/4%. So the direction we're looking for is whether we should renew the agreement. Staff feels it's a good agreement. We already have a set fee and fuel charge. We saw a significant increase the last time this was out to bid. We know that if we renew, the increase would be 5% for the next 2 years. And overall, there have been very minimal issues with collections or customer service. Ending the agreement or rebidding would require a 30-day written notice to Rumpke, and we would need to know if that's our direction really now, because in order to meet the time frame of the bid process, we would have to start having bid specs ready by the end of this month. So to extend the current agreement, The city council would just need to pass a municipal order at a regular council meeting. But if we were going to decide to rebid, here's the timeline, and you can see that, time would be of the essence if that's the direction we would like to go. So why are we in the business of bidding trash collection to begin with? The Kent County requires by ordinance that garbage collection occur to every residence within the county, and they do make the cities responsible for the franchise of waste collection. So with that, staff recommends that we would enter a renewal of the waste collection contract. Any discussion?
Ms. Kyle?
I agree. I've been very happy with Rumpke. In fact, I have one of those large items being taken away, and they're very friendly. You just call the number, the customer service number, they tell you exactly what to do, and for some people that don't know, you do need to wrap your furniture, mattresses in plastic, have them contained, and they just pick it up with the regular pickup if it's not real heavy. So they're very helpful, and they've not missed any of our trash collections so far, so knock on wood. But I've been very happy with them. And I think a lot of people don't know that they should do that plastic thing, but if they call them, they'll tell you. And also the second tote, I had a neighbor who told me that we were charged, and I says, no, sir, we're not. You get the second tote free if you need it, So just wanted to get that out there. But I'm very happy with them, and I think we should continue because I think the price is really great.
Thank you. Mr. Cahill?
Just a couple questions. I don't know if I know we have the fuel surcharge going on right now. We should be hitting our year for that, correct? Will that be going away? And I guess the question to answer that, are they using diesel trucks or gas trucks? And who determines the fuel price? Because I'm sure that they're not going to Speedway to get their fuel.
Right. Robin, can I call on you to answer that?
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Thank you.
Does that mean it's on?
You're on.
Okay, great. Okay, what was the question again?
Fuel surcharge, we should be coming up on our year. And then what determines the fuel? When are you guys using gas or diesel trucks?
We are using, okay, so let's backtrack a minute. The fuel is up to be reviewed in March of this year. We are holding the current bill until we see what that average rate is for fuel before we send that March bill out. And it is based off of diesel fuel, and we work off of the Midwest region for that percentage that we use. So it gets trucked into us, and then of course, that's what we use for our trucks. Anything that we can accommodate through the landfills, through the methane gas, we obviously use those, but that's more about out of our Cincinnati market right now.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Reckers?
As part of this renewal, would any other elements of the initial contract be changing, such as the percentage of the fuel increase? Should it be in surcharge compared to our dialogue that we had last spring when we made the decision to go to Rumpke?
Sherry?
So the fuel surcharge, once it's, I guess, researched what it's going to be, it would be whatever falls on the chart here. It's in front of you what they would charge for the fuel surcharge, but they can't go over the 84 cents per week. They have to go by what's in the agreement that we currently have.
So the agreement is not subject to change as part of the fuel being reevaluated in
No.
March? Thank you.
That is correct, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Sherry, I know at one time we had some issues with the bills not going out to residents. For instance, I still have only ever received one paper bill from Rumpke myself, which is not a big deal for me, but I know there were other residents that weren't receiving a paper bill, or they were receiving it like almost right before the due date. And I know that I noticed this says they don't charge a late fee for 90 days, which is good. I just wondered if we'd had any other, has that been resolved that we're aware of, or have we had other complaints? Because that was a pretty consistent complaint initially when we first switched to Rumpke.
I have not received any complaints on the billing in some time now. From what I understand, they're billed quarterly, and I know that whenever we were getting those complaints, I worked with Robin, and Robin worked with the billing company.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
And just one more
Mr.
question
Cahill.
too. What does a solid waste event look like? Is it similar to what the three counties do, or, so that could be hazardous, non-hazardous, shredding? What could that look like?
The solid waste event for the three counties is on a larger scale than what it would be if you were to have one in your own city. And what we mean by that would be like a spring cleanup, a fall cleanup, you know, things of that nature, where you order roll-off dumpsters and set them out at your public works facility, and residents are to use those for 3 days, a weekend, a week, however you wanted to set that up. Household hazardous waste, we generally, we just work with the three counties once a year for that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, it seems like there's some consensus to move forward with the municipal order. So we'll make sure that we have that on the agenda for the March council meeting. Okay, thank you so much for being here and answering our questions.
Thank you, Robin.
Okay, next item on the agenda is short-term rental zoning discussion. Councilwoman Reckers.
This could be removed from the agenda. It's not critical to discuss, but I guess I could give a little bit of a review as to why I asked for the details. So in 2018, the governing body of the city voted to prohibit short-term rentals, transient rentals, such as like an Airbnb. And I spoke with Emmy Randall after the last time I asked about it, and she stated that as part of the Z21 adaptation of the zoning changes, those would supersede, those county Z21 specifications would supersede, you know, the prior prohibited language. So there's combination of permissible use and conditional for short-term rentals, which that information is available to the public. I just wanted to see what it looked like because I've had people ask me about it who are interested in doing it. So I've directed them to that department.
Okay, great, thank you. I appreciate it. Ms. Jasper Lucas?
I just have a quick question for Emmy about this. Would those still be subject to the business license? Those folks would still have to have a business license? And would they also still have to register as a rental property owner? Okay.
Okay, next item on for discussion is the Gary Meyer Emergency Fund. Councilman Tyson Hermes.
Yes, Mayor, thank you. We spoke about this last month and said that we would want to talk about it more after people have an opportunity to think about it a little bit more. But just to summarize again, the purpose of this, this is regarding the $5 million that was transferred into the capital fund from the unrestricted reserves. And my point in bringing it up is that the two things I guess I wanted to accomplish with this would be to have it be its own line item so that we can track, so the council can track the total in that fund, and then also to establish some rules on what triggers the use of those funds. And so it's still up for discussion. You know, some of the things we talked about was those funds could be used in the event of a natural disaster or an event of an act of God that impacts the city capital or upon the vote of the majority of council. So I'm open for ideas.
Ms. Reckers?
One of the other items we talked about when you first brought this up, Mr. Hermes, was a potential to revisit the strategic plan in looking at if there's an opportunity to use those funds in response to improvements, or not, I don't want to say improvements because we have a good foundation for a strategic plan. So we discussed creating a strategic plan task force, and on the 9th, I sent out an email to city staff to kind of establish a timeline for discussion around that. And I believe we landed on like May, June-ish timeline. So at this point, I don't think that we should. We don't really have a need to touch those funds. We have an abundance. Well, I don't want to say abundance. Solid foundation in our accounts right now. I don't think that there's a need to touch those funds. And I would be open to establishing some guardrails around the use of those funds in conjunction with the strategic plan, as we mentioned in the last meeting. That meeting needs to happen, which as of right now is slated for May or June-ish. So.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that ultimately the goal would be to never touch these funds. However, I know that if it just sits in capital, in 20 years, that money won't be there, if we don't pay special attention to it or set those guardrails around it. So, yeah, I'm not in a big rush to do that. I do think it should be a line item for the upcoming budget, and that would be my goal there. But yeah, just establishing some type of trigger that allows the city to use those funds.
Did you want it to remain in the capital fund? But I thought you had said something about creating its own fund to where it was a separate account.
It's still capital.
Yeah.
I just meant like it should have its own line item so we can track that. If it's $5 million this year and then it's $4 million the following year, it's gonna cause council to say, what happened? Why did we use that $1 million?
Okay, so in the capital fund, we'll just have it, just so that I make sure we're doing this right.
I mean, I know
So-
there's been some discussion about the name of it, and I'm not trying to be funny or curse about that. Originally, I was calling it the Gary Meyer Emergency Capital Fund. That is, not necessarily memorial, but it's something that we, as a council, all know exactly what that is. It's more just to try to be succinct about what that money is earmarked for.
Okay, so for the purposes of budget, what we can do is, in the capital asset fund, we'll make sure that where it says unreserved at the bottom, that we'll have a special line item specifically for the Gary Meyer Emergency Fund that will be $5 million. So it won't show up in appropriations, it won't show up in revenues, it'll be at the very bottom, underneath unreserved. So it is a reserve, we're now reserving it for that purpose. So we'll have the unreserved still, but then we'll have the reserved funds. Does that make sense? Is that suitable? Okay. Got it. Cool. And then during the strategic planning process, we can figure out what do we want to, what parameters do you want to put around that? Because it does make sense to have some kind of, what do we use it for? What constitutes as an emergency? What is the process to access those funds if said emergency happens? Okay. Ms. Kyle?
Yeah, and I agree with Mr. Hermes. We need to somehow have it marked so that when we have a turnover of council and maybe mayor or whatever, that the people coming in will know that this is the purpose of these funds. And I think that was the intent. So,
And I think you've said that, Mr. Hermes. You've talked about,
Yeah.
we're all not going to be sitting here in 20 years. God willing, we're not going to be sitting here in 20 years. So, we have to figure out how to make sure that the intentions of Gary Meyer and this council are followed through if they're important. So, all right, cool. You're welcome. Okay. Next item on the agenda, is that okay? Okay. Next item on the agenda is a resolution that I know we did not talk about this at a previous council meeting, and I apologize. But I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Senate Bill 50, House Bill 50, where it would be adding in partisanship into our local city offices, Board of Educations, school board, and soil and water conservation offices. County commissioner, I guess in some situations, they don't have partisan elections as well. So this would make all of these required to be partisan elections, which not only adds partisanship where, gosh, we don't need more partisanship in this world, but it also adds additional elections. And I think Gabe Summy was very clear at our mayor's group meeting last Saturday that they're not necessarily in support of this. It would be an additional cost associated with running our elections. Right now, it's only Covington and the city of Erlanger that have primaries. This would force every city to have a potential primary. So there's just absolutely no benefit. And from what I can understand, there is bipartisan support for nonpartisan elections. So anytime you have Democrats and Republicans seeing eye to eye to keep the partisanship out of elections, I really think we need to take note. So a couple of other cities have passed a resolution opposing Senate Bill 50 and House Bill 50. I have a resolution in front of you all. If you so choose, we can, do we not have this resolution in front of them? Oh, it was emailed to you. Does anybody want a paper copy? And I'll walk it over to you. Yeah. Friday. Yeah, it went out in the packet on Friday. But if you want, I think there's a couple of, is there some out there? Yes. Okay, all right, cool. So this is actually exactly the template that was used for Fort Wright and Independence. It was just changed to, for Erlanger's purposes. I would love for you all to pass this resolution, but it's okay. Well, it's a resolution, so they're. Okay, so we would do a reading. So Alex is here, so she could do a reading, but I want to make sure that you all want to do it. Is there support? I'm seeing Miss Kyle is shaking her head. Is there enough support? Go for it? Okay, so we'll go ahead and read it, and then we'll do a motion. Well, we need a motion. We need a motion to, okay. Okay, Ms. Kyle, Ms. Jasper Lucas. All right, go ahead.
A resolution opposing the passage of Senate Bill 50 and House Bill 50 relating to partisan local elections. As noted, this would just be a statement from the city of Erlanger supporting and urging our state legislatures to vote against House Bill 50 and Senate Bill 50, as well as any future legislation that requires partisan elections on a local level.
Okay, we'll go ahead and do a roll call vote. Ms. Hoffman, please. It's a resolution.
Mr. Hermes,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Cahill,
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Skidmore. Yes, ma'am. Ms. Kyle,
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Jasper Lucas,
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Wilson,
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Nicely,
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Reckers,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Skidmore.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great, thank you so much. I know that this is being discussed tomorrow in Frankfurt, so I'll make sure that this gets down to them as quickly as possible. Cool, thank you. I just need to add one other item to the agenda. I have Representative Steve Doan here with us, and he wants to talk to us briefly about House Bill 343. He is seeking a resolution in support of the occupational licensing reciprocity. We don't have a resolution prepared at this time, but
I'll jump in and you know, what you guys
click your, there you go.
What you guys have done with the resolutions, I've been getting them, the House Bill 50, Senate Bill 50 resolutions. It means something to us. We're looking at them, we're reading them, we're seeing them. It kind of tells us where our local government is. And so down in Frankfurt, I've got a bill, occupational licensing reform bill. It's one that I've had conversations with the Northern Kentucky Chamber of Commerce and a lot of local leaders up here, city councils such as yourself, mayors, that we're trying to do the same thing and build some similar support for. What this bill does is it's universal occupational reciprocity. So if you're a licensed hairdresser over in Ohio and you want to move to Kentucky, you would be able to move over, pay a $100 fee, and we would recognize your license so long as your Ohio license meets the same educational requirements we have here. It's a quick fix to our workforce shortage. It's something that 19 other states have passed. By the time Kentucky passes it, we'll probably be number 24 on the list. So it's a popular thing right now. It's different than a compact. So a lot of states have compacts where we recognize each other's licenses, but if you're not a member of that compact, you can't get in. So it's something that I wanted to present to you guys and see if you'd be interested in doing a resolution as well and have that sent down to our members so that we can start to push that and address critical workforce solutions here in our community. And if you guys have any more questions about it, it is House Bill 343. It's been filed. You can get on there and look at it. It's about 5 pages long, but it's not too complicated of a read. And any questions or anything like that, happy to answer those. And if you have any questions about session in general, I can answer those as well.
Representative Doan, I have a quick question. Being in the heating and air company business as my profession, would that apply to HVAC techs and stuff in the licensing as well?
It is universal. The language of the bill specifically relates to every legal occupation. So if you're a drug dealer on the street, that's illegal. It doesn't relate to you. But if you are an HVAC, it would relate to you. A nurse, a doctor, an optician, you know, all of those occupational licenses. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm kind of going to piggyback on what she said. I'm a licensed insurance agent. Every state has, well, not every state, but that's one of the few occupations that I'm aware of that doesn't necessarily have true reciprocity across state lines. Would that apply?
It's universal. So it would apply to all. And I don't know if maybe there's a specific regulation. There's a whole, the problem with filing this legislation is everybody comes out of the woodwork on their specific thing. But I would imagine that, the way it's drafted, it would, yeah.
So, I have 3 different state licenses right now. I have California, Ohio, and Kentucky. I have a Kentucky resident license, and then my other 2 licenses are non-resident. So, and maybe the specifics, but like some states require fingerprinting. So California requires fingerprinting for insurance agents, Kentucky does not. So I had to have a different type of background check for California than I did for my own resident state. How, and I'm sure there's other occupational licenses that have that same, difference in requirements by state. How would that be affected?
Yep, so you would still have to go through background checks. You would still have to go through those safety requirements. We're not removing any safety barriers or anything like that. In fact, the bill requires that you certify that you have no, felonies, no criminal history, no background like that, so that we can make sure we're bringing good people in, and people aren't just moving across states to skirt certain requirements that would deem them otherwise not appropriate.
So that actually is already a requirement for me. I already have to sign something saying I haven't committed a felony, but California actually runs a fingerprint, like a wet ink fingerprint check. My concern is, are there people who may do exactly what you just said and try to skirt? I mean, just signing something saying you haven't committed a felony doesn't necessarily mean you didn't actually commit a felony.
You would still go to the same board. So if there's a licensure board for insurance agents, you would still go to that board. You would fill out an application. They would see your application. They would run it through their same safety checks to make sure, and again, check your education, make sure you've got everything lined up. And then if you fit through that approval, you would get licensed.
So a nurse would be under the same type of, okay.
It's not creating a new board or a different board. It's going to be the people that have run that board in the past and have the experience and that in-house knowledge would still be in charge of that.
So somebody that came from Ohio that was a nurse, and maybe they'd done something to jeopardize their license in Ohio, would we be aware of that?
Yes.
Like we are now?
You would have to submit that with your
Okay.
application. And so typically, there's certificates of good standing that
Right.
go when they make those requests. And so you would have to have that
Okay.
come in with it.
Okay.
Well, thank you all so much. And Mayor, thank you for having me. And if you guys need anything, feel free to reach out. Thanks.
Thanks, Representative Doan. Kara Kramer is going to be reaching out to you pretty soon about Senate Bill 112. If you could take a look at that. There's still more research to be done, but we might ask for your support. Okay. All right. That concludes our agenda this evening. Do I entertain a motion that we adjourn? Mr. Hermes, Ms. Nicely, any discussion? All in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Have a good evening.